There is a silence that does not mean the absence of sound. It means the absence of chaos. In the heart of 17th century Japan, a young retainer named Ryo stood before the ruins of his master's house. Flames devoured the world he once served, and with it, his purpose. In that silence after destruction, one question carved itself into his soul. How does a man remain still when everything around him burns? Lost between rage and emptiness, Ryo wandered through mountains where monks spoke in riddles and swordsmen carried death like a whisper. Among them, he met an old master known only as Jinbei, keeper of a forgotten discipline, the Hagakure Code, an art not of killing, but of seeing. Jinbei taught that presence is not found through control, but through surrender, a mind that sees reality without resistance. This is the story of Ryo's rebirth, the forging of a spirit so still that chaos itself bowed before it, a journey through discipline, fear, silence, and awakening. This is the lost art of presence. Chapter 1. The noise within, the war had ended, but inside Ryo, the war never stopped. Smoke still clung to his armor as he stood before the blackened ruins of his master's home. The banners, once painted with crimson sigils, now hung as ragged ghosts, swaying in the wind. Each gust carried whispers of failure. His failure. He had survived when his lord had not. And survival, he realized, was not peace. It was punishment. In the days that followed, Ryo wandered through the province like a ghost. Villagers avoided his eyes. Children stopped their games when he passed. His blade remained sheathed, but his thoughts, sharp, restless, and unmerciful, cut him from within. He replayed the night of betrayal 1,000 times. The ambush, the blood, his hesitation. Every second was dissected by the mind, like a surgeon who could not stop cutting, even after the wound had healed. You could have saved him, the voice whispered. You were too slow. Too weak. That voice was not his master's. It was the echo of his ego, the mind's tyrant, forever demanding control, forever denying peace. Ryo believed silence would come through discipline. So he forced himself into stillness. He sat for hours in perfect posture, fists clenched, jaw locked, eyes unmoving. A soldier trying to conquer his thoughts with the same violence that once ruled his blade. But the more he resisted, the louder the noise became. Modern science would later call it cognitive dissonance. The mind's rebellion against repression. The more one suppresses emotion, the stronger its return. But Ryo did not know science. He knew only the ache of trying to master a storm by tightening his grip around it. He began to despise his own reflection. The still pond by his campfire showed him a stranger, eyes hollow, breath uneven. When the wind disturbed the surface, he struck the water in anger, as if chaos itself could be silenced by force. That night, sleep refused him. Memories swarmed like crows. He envied the calmness of the dead. He mistook numbness for peace. Days blurred into one another, a loop of walking, sitting, breathing, failing. The mind, he discovered, could scream even in total silence. Once, he climbed a ridge overlooking the valley where his lord's home once stood. Ash covered the ground like snow. The world was still, yet his heart beat as though running from something unseen. He whispered to himself, I am disciplined. I am unshaken. But beneath the mantra, another truth trembled. I am afraid. Fear. the quiet enemy. It was not the fear of death, but the fear of meaninglessness. Without a master, without duty, who was he? The ancient scrolls had warned of this emptiness, that when the warrior loses his external purpose, he must face the battle within. No teacher had prepared him for that. Ryo tried to meditate. He followed the breaths, counted them, forced them into rhythm. But each inhalation brought memories of screams. Each exhalation carried the weight of guilt. The harder he tried to be still, the more he trembled. He realized discipline, when born from fear, becomes tension, and tension is not strength. It is a cage. One dawn, after nights without rest, Ryo collapsed in exhaustion beneath a cedar tree. Rain began to fall, not a storm, just a slow, steady drizzle that softened the ground around him. He felt something for the first time in months. Not peace, but surrender. He let the rain fall without resistance. He stopped trying to hold the breath, to control the thought, to be strong. And in that small, trembling pause, a flicker of quiet emerged, faint but undeniable. It vanished as quickly as it came, but it was enough to awaken a question inside him, a different kind of question. If silence cannot be forced, then where does it come from? That question would drive him away from the ruins of war, deeper into the mountains, toward a temple, and a man who had already killed his own noise. The noise within had broken him. The silence ahead would rebuild him. Chapter 1 ruined. Part 2. The road into the mountains was not marked by signs, but by silence. Each step Ryo took seemed to draw him further from the world of men, from markets and laughter and war. The forest grew thicker, the path narrower. He carried only his sword and the question that would not let him rest. If silence cannot be forced, then where does it come from? The days were long, filled with the hum of insects and the crack of branches underfoot. He walked as though chased by something unseen. And perhaps he was, chased by the ghost of his own unmastered mind. Every sound became a test. The rustle of leaves, the cry of a hawk, the crunch of gravel. The world was loud because his attention was scattered. When one cannot be present, every moment screams. Modern science would later name this the attentional drift, the mind's inability to stay tethered to the now. But in Ryo's time, such truths had no language. There was only experience, raw, unfiltered, sacred in its pain. He set camp beside a stream one night. As he cooked rice over the fire, he caught his reflection in the metal pot, his face weary, eyes dim. He muttered, "A warrior who cannot control his thoughts is already defeated." And in that statement lay his greatest misunderstanding. For control was not mastery. Control was fear, dressed in armor. The stream beside him murmured softly, a song of water against stone. For a moment, he watched it, the effortless flow, the way it yielded to every obstacle, and yet carved through mountains over time. He wondered if the mind could ever move like that. But then came thought, and thought broke the stillness. It always did. He clenched his fists, furious at his weakness. Why can't I stop thinking? The forest offered no reply. Only wind through pine needles, ancient and indifferent. At dawn, fog rolled through the valley like a pale ghost. Ryo rose, feeling the ache in his legs, and began to climb higher. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he could not return. As he climbed, a memory surfaced, his master's final words before battle. The sword is only as clear as the mind that wields it. Back then, he thought it meant precision. Now, it meant something else. Perception. The world blurred through fatigue and hunger. Yet, amidst that exhaustion, a strange awareness began to form. He noticed the rhythm of his footsteps, the pulse behind his eyes, the faint mist curling through the trees. For the first time, he wasn't trying to achieve stillness. He was watching the struggle itself, like observing a storm from within, rather than trying to stop it. It was subtle, but profound, a seed of detachment. He began to understand the mind is not the enemy, resistance is. When he reached a ridge that overlooked the valley, the clouds split open and sunlight flooded through. He sat down, breathing slowly, and whispered, not to the gods, not to his master, but to the space within him that had survived every war. Let me see the truth of what is. The wind answered with nothing, yet it felt like everything. He closed his eyes. For a fleeting moment, there was no guilt, no noise, no self. It passed, as all moments do, but it left behind a direction, not of the feet, but of the spirit. He rose again, lighter than before. Somewhere beyond these mountains, he sensed a presence, a stillness, unlike anything he had known. It was calling, though it spoke no words. And so, Rio walked toward it, unaware that his next teacher was waiting. Broom in hand, sweeping the floor of a ruined temple, erasing dust from stone as gently as one erases thought from the mind. The warrior had witnessed the noise within. Now he would meet the man who lived beyond it. Chapter 2. The Monk of the Empty Temple. The mountain path narrowed until it disappeared entirely. Rio's boots sank into the moss, damp and silent. Mist hung low, softening the edges of trees until the world seemed painted in shades of gray. He had walked for days without seeing another soul. Hunger had sharpened him, solitude had hollowed him, but there was something beneath that emptiness, a quiet hum that felt less like loneliness and more like preparation. Then, through the veil of fog, a faint sound, the sweep of a broom against stone. Rio stopped. Ahead stood what remained of an old temple, its roof half collapsed, its gate crooked, its prayer flags torn and colorless. Yet someone had cleared the path. The ground was bare of leaves, the air strangely alive. At the temple's entrance, a single man swept the courtyard with deliberate calm. Old, thin, wearing robes so plain they seemed part of the mountain itself. His hair white, his eyes neither kind nor cold, simply present. Rio bowed slightly. Are you the keeper of this temple? The man did not look up. The broom moved with rhythm, steady and unhurried. Keeper? No, he said softly. Only dust remains here. I tend to it. The simplicity of the answer disarmed Rio. He stepped forward. I seek a place to rest. And perhaps to learn. The old man nodded to a bench near the wall. Rest then. Learning will come if it must. Rio sat, uneasy. The man continued sweeping, as if the visitor were invisible. For the first time in months, Rio felt no demand upon him. No question, no judgment, no teaching. Only silence and the soft whisper of the broom. Minutes passed, then hours. The rhythm of sweeping became hypnotic. It was neither loud nor quiet, simply constant, Eventually, Ryo broke the stillness. You work as though the fate of the world depends on this dust. The old man paused, leaning on the broom. And does it not? Each leaf I move is a world changed. Each breath, a new beginning. Ryo frowned. The world burns, and you speak of leaves. The monk smiled faintly. And yet, it still burns. Then, without another word, he resumed sweeping. Ryo's pride bristled. He wanted instruction, wisdom, perhaps even discipline. Not riddles wrapped in chores. But the man offered nothing but silence and repetition. By nightfall, Ryo could no longer contain himself. "You do nothing while the world rots," he snapped. The old man finally looked up. His gaze was clear, not piercing, not heavy, simply aware. "And yet," he said, "the world still moves." The fire in Ryo's chest met a wall of water. The words sank into him, slow and deep. He didn't understand them, but they stayed. Later, as they sat by a small fire, Ryo asked, "You live alone here?" The monk nodded. "Companions come and go. The mountain remains." Ryo hesitated. "Who are you?" "I was called Jinbei," the man said, "but names only matter to those still searching for themselves." Jinbei poured tea, hands steady. Every motion, pouring, setting the cup, breathing, carried a kind of precision Ryo had never seen. Not rigid, but intentional. "You move like a swordsman," Ryo said. Jinbei chuckled. "I was one, until I learned the sword was only half a path." Ryo looked up. "And the other half?" "The space between strikes." The fire crackled. The night thickened around them. Ryo didn't yet grasp what Jinbei meant, but for the first time in a long time, he felt curiosity instead of despair. He looked at the monk's broom resting by the wall. Simple, unadorned, and utterly still. Somehow, he sensed it held more power than his sword ever had. That night, the young warrior stayed. By dawn, he would realize the temple was not empty. It was waiting to teach him what silence truly meant. Chapter 2. Part 2. Morning unfolded without sound. Only the rustle of wind through the trees and the scrape of Jinbei's broom against stone. Ryo watched from the temple steps, his body sore from sleep on the cold floor, his mind uneasy from the quiet. He had known battlefields filled with screams, storms of arrows and fire, but this silence felt heavier. It made every thought echo louder. Jinbei did not greet him. He simply continued sweeping. Each stroke of the broom seemed precise, like a sword form, deliberate, effortless, eternal. Ryo approached. "Why do you begin your day this way?" Jinbei didn't look up. "Because the dust returns every day." Ryo frowned. "Then what's the point?" The monk stopped, leaned on his broom and said, "If you do not sweep, the dust will own you. If you sweep without awareness, you will serve it. The act is not to win, it is to see." Ryo felt a quiet irritation rise within him. "You speak in riddles." Jinbei nodded. "Words can only point. Seeing must be done with the mind that listens, not the mind that argues." The warrior said nothing, but inside him, a battle raged between comprehension and resistance. Later that day, Jinbei handed him another broom. "Help me." Ryo obeyed, at first, mechanically. His strokes were sharp, his rhythm impatient. He wanted to finish. After a while, he noticed Jinbei's movements, slow, flowing, almost without effort. Each sweep seemed part of his breathing. The air around him felt lighter. Ryo tried to imitate him, but his own motions felt clumsy, forced. Sweat formed at his temples. His mind whispered, "You're doing it wrong. Faster, better." And in that struggle, he saw himself clearly, the same restless fire that had once burned in battle, now fighting dust instead of men. He dropped the broom. "This is meaningless," he said. Jinbei turned toward him, calm as ever. "Only because you have not yet learned to be meaningless." Ryo blinked. "To be meaningless?" "Yes," Jinbei replied. "The sword kills to end conflict. The broom moves to reveal the flaw. Neither believes it is the act. Only man does." The monk resumed sweeping, voice low, steady. "When the self disappears, action becomes art." For a long while, neither spoke. The mountain breathed around them. The temple's emptiness no longer felt empty. It felt alive. That evening, Jinbei prepared rice, while Ryo repaired a broken gate. No instructions were given, no compliments offered. Yet everything was done in perfect harmony. Ryo realized this man's teaching was not in words, but in presence. The way Jinbei poured tea, focused yet free. The way he ate, slow, silent, grateful. The way he blinked, rarely, as if his eyes were at peace with what they saw. It wasn't control. It was communion. After dinner, Ryo spoke quietly. "Master Jinbei, you live without hurry, without fear. How did you learn this?" The old man stirred the coals. "By watching how the world moves when I do not interfere." Ryo thought of his life, every battle, every command, every attempt to dominate chaos. "Then what his strength?" he asked. Jinbei's eyes lifted, glowing faintly in the firelight. "Strength," he said, "is not how much weight the hand can hold, but how gently it can release." The flames cracked. Outside, rain began to fall again. In that soft rhythm, something inside Ryo began to loosen, a knot that had lived in his chest since the war. He didn't speak of it. He didn't even understand it. But as the night deepened, and Jinbei swept the temple one last time before rest, Ryo finally closed his eyes without fear. For the first time, the silence didn't crush him. It held him. Transition to Chapter 3. The broom had become his sword, and the silence, his new battlefield. But the true test of presence still awaited him, beside the endless roar of fallen water. Chapter 3. The Trial of Silence. Weeks passed. Days blended into one another like brushstrokes on the same vast canvas of quiet. Ryo had grown accustomed to the rhythm of temple life, waking at dawn, sweeping, cooking, breathing. His hands had become steady, his voice less urgent, yet beneath the surface, a restlessness still pulsed. Jinbei saw it without a word. The old man's gaze often lingered on Ryo, with the still attention of one who hears the wind shifting before the storm arrives. One morning, as mist gathered around the mountains, Jinbei spoke. "It is time," he said. "Time for what?" Ryo asked. "For you to meet your own mind." He led Ryo down a narrow trail that wound through pines and stone until the roar of water began to fill the air. They stopped before a towering waterfall, white, endless, alive. The sound was overwhelming. The constant thunder of falling water striking rock. It wasn't mere noise. It was total presence made visible. Jinbei pointed to a flat rock near the base. "Sit there. Do not move until you can hear the space between the drops." Ryo frowned. "That's impossible. The sound never stops." Jinbei smiled faintly. "Exactly." Then the old man left him there, alone, surrounded by the roar. At first, Rio tried to meditate as he'd been taught. Straight back, slow breath, focus on stillness. But the sound battered him from all sides, unrelenting. His mind screamed against it. He tried to count breaths. He tried to block the sound. He tried to force calmness through sheer discipline. But the more he tried, the louder it became. The noise outside had awakened the noise within. Thoughts, memories, doubts. Why did I fail my master? What if I never find peace? What if this is all meaningless? Every drop of water seemed to echo his fears back at him. The sun climbed higher. Hours became days. He lost count. His legs numbed, his throat burned, and his mind, once a weapon, turned against him. He screamed once, furious at the world, at the monk, at himself. But the waterfall did not care. It kept falling, precise, eternal, indifferent. And in that indifference lay the first teaching. The world does not silence itself for man's comfort. The warrior must learn to be silent within it. By the third day, fatigue broke through Rio's resistance. He stopped counting breaths. He stopped trying to meditate. Instead, he began to observe. He noticed the rhythm of the water, not chaotic, but cyclical. Each crash followed another, like a heart beating against eternity. Between each pulse of sound, there was something, a faint pause, a space too thin for words, but real enough to feel. He started listening into the noise rather than against it. For the first time, the roar no longer threatened him. It included him. His mind, stripped of control, began to yield. He remembered Jinbei's words, "When the self disappears, action becomes art." Perhaps when the self disappears, even noise becomes silence. The sun set behind the falls, painting the mist in crimson light. Rio's thoughts faded into rhythm, the same endless flow as the water. He no longer fought the chaos. He became part of it. But the mind's surrender is never final. For before awakening comes the final storm, the confrontation with the self that clings to control. Chapter 3. Part 2. Night fell like a curtain of ink. The waterfall shimmered silver under the moonlight, each drop glinting for an instant before vanishing. A dance between existence and disappearance. Rio sat unmoving, soaked to the bone. His thoughts had grown faint, like echoes from another life. And yet, deep beneath that quiet, a new voice stirred, the last defense of the self. "You've done well," it whispered. "You're almost enlightened. Soon you'll be above all this." The mind, clever and desperate, had changed its mask. Pride disguised as peace. Control reborn as false surrender. Rio felt it, subtle but dangerous. The same desire to achieve, now wearing spiritual robes. He realized even the pursuit of silence can become noise. The awareness burned through him like cold fire. He whispered to the darkness, "Even now, I am still fighting." The wind answered with mist. The waterfall did not stop. He closed his eyes. The sound filled him, not as an obstacle, but as proof of life's endless motion. Each drop struck the rocks and was reborn into mist. Nothing ended. Nothing began. Everything simply was. And in that moment, something broke. Or perhaps, something finally dissolved. The boundaries between sound and listener vanished. There was no Rio, no waterfall, no practice. Only awareness, infinite, uncrossable, free. Time melted. He didn't know if minutes passed or days. When the sun returned, it found him smiling. Not from triumph, but from understanding. Jinbei appeared at the edge of the clearing, his presence quiet as dawn itself. "You've returned," the old monk said. Ryo bowed deeply. "I never left." Jinbei's lips curved in the faintest smile. "What did you learn from the waterfall?" Ryo looked toward the rushing water, eyes calm. "It never stopped," he said. "I was the one who kept resisting it." The monk nodded. "Good. Then you understand. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the absence of the one who judges it." He gestured toward the horizon, where light broke through the mist. "Remember this. Discipline is not resistance to chaos. It is the mastery of perception. The world will not become quieter. Only your mind can." Ryo felt tears he hadn't known were waiting. They came not from sorrow, but from release. The shedding of all that was clenched, all that was heavy. He said softly, "Then peace is not found in stillness, but in surrender." Jinbei placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, to surrender is not to give up. It is to stop fighting what is." They stood together for a long while, watching the endless fall of water, its rhythm like the breath of the earth itself. In the modern world, psychologists would later describe this state as flow, where the self dissolves into pure engagement. The boundary between observer and action disappears, and consciousness expands. But centuries before the word existed, Ryo had entered it by losing himself completely. When they returned to the temple, Ryo no longer walked with haste. Each step felt deliberate, light, and alive. He no longer sought peace. He was peace, moving. Jinbei watched him closely, seeing the subtle change. The young warrior had not yet mastered presence, but he had glimpsed its shape. The waterfall had washed away his arrogance. What remained was clarity. That night, as crickets sang outside the temple walls, Ryo whispered to himself, "I no longer fear the noise. I see it as part of the song." And in that realization, the storm within finally rested. But the ego is clever. Even in stillness, it hides in the shadow of enlightenment. Ryo's next battle would not be with chaos, but with pride disguised as peace. Chapter 4. The Ego's Last Stand. Months passed like drifting clouds. Ryo's life at the temple had become quiet rhythm. Morning sweeping, afternoon tea, evening meditation. The roar of his thoughts had softened into a steady hum, and even the memories of fire and loss seemed to dissolve in the gentle pulse of his breath. He had begun to mistake calm for completion. One day, Jinbei called to him as they stood beneath the fading light of dusk. "Ryo," he said, "you've learned to face noise without fear. But tell me, can you face praise without pride?" Ryo bowed, unsure how to respond. "Master, I have no pride left." Jinbei smiled faintly, the kind of smile that sees through illusions. "Then let us see." That night, a group of travelers from a nearby province arrived seeking shelter. They were Ronin, masterless samurai, and one among them, a broad-shouldered man with a scar down his cheek, recognized Ryo. "You're the boy from the Lord Akechi's house, aren't you?" the man said. "I thought you died when your master fell." Ryo nodded. "In some ways, I did." The Ronin laughed, his tone edged with mockery. "And now you hide behind monks and brooms. The warrior who refuses to fight." How noble. Ryo said nothing. The others snickered. Maybe the waterfall washed the courage out of him. Still, Ryo remained still, his breath calm, yet deep inside, something stirred. A pulse, subtle but sharp. The ego, the old self, whispering, "Prove them wrong. Show them who you are." Jinbei, sitting by the fire, watched with unreadable eyes. The Ronin leaned closer, his sake sour breath thick in the air. "Come, monk warrior. Draw your blade. Let's see if peace can save your pride." The sound of laughter rang in Ryo's ears. His hand twitched toward his sword before he realized it. The muscle memory of battle was still alive beneath the calm. He breathed slowly. The fire crackled. The world hung in the pause between action and reaction. And then, a voice within. "You are beyond this." Another illusion. The ego reborn, now wearing the robes of enlightenment. He exhaled, slowly. His hand fell back to his side. He turned to the Ronin and bowed. "There is nothing here worth defending." The laughter died. The man stared, bewildered. Jinbei spoke at last, voice like still water. "Do you see, travelers? The strongest warrior is the one who can be provoked. A man ruled by pride is a puppet pulled by invisible strings." The scarred Ronin muttered something under his breath and turned away. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the night sky. Later, when the guests had gone to sleep, Jinbei approached Ryo. "You are silent," the master said, "but not free." Ryo looked down. "I still felt anger." "Good," Jinbei replied. "You saw it. That is enough for now. Remember, Ryo, even the desire to appear humble is pride. Ego hides behind every virtue until you see it without judgment." They stood beneath a field of stars. The air was crisp, the world impossibly wide. Ryo spoke softly, "So the battle never ends." Jinbei nodded. "It ends the moment you stop calling it one." Ryo closed his eyes, hearing the faint echo of the waterfall in his memory. The silence was not empty, it was full. And yet, he sensed something approaching, a greater test. One that would strip away the last illusion of self. For the first time, he understood that enlightenment was not a mountain to climb, but a veil to see through. But even clarity can become a cage when the mind begins to worship its own freedom. The true test of presence awaited Ryo, not in the temple, but back among the storms of men. Chapter 4. Part 2. The next morning, the travelers were gone. Only their laughter lingered, faint as ghosts on the wind. Ryo swept the courtyard as dawn burned the mist away. Each motion was deliberate. The slow arc of the broom, the whisper of sand against stone. Yet beneath that rhythm, a restlessness stirred. He had chosen peace, yet he could feel the pride of having done so. The thought struck him like a hidden arrow. "I am calm. I am awakened. I am better." The ego had found a new disguise, spiritual superiority. That realization unsettled him more than the Ronin's insults. He placed the broom down and walked toward the meditation hall, where Jinbei sat before a single candle. "Master," Ryo said quietly, "how do I rid myself of this feeling, this pride that wears humility's mask?" Jinbei opened his eyes, the candlelight reflecting in their stillness. "By seeing that you cannot rid yourself of it. Pride belongs to the self. Remove the self, and pride dissolves on its own." Ryo frowned. "But how can a man live without a self?" The old monk smiled. "By living so completely in the moment that there is no one left to watch it." For days, Ryo meditated on those words. He practiced being so present that his thoughts dissolved like smoke. But the more he tried to be present, the more he felt the watcher within. The subtle voice saying, "Now I am present." Presence cannot be forced. It can only happen when effort ceases. And so, Jinbei gave him one final task. "Go," he said, "down the mountain. Walk among men again. Carry no sword, no robe, no title. Speak to no one of the temple. See how long your stillness survives among the noise." Ryo hesitated. "Why must I leave?" "Because a flame only knows its strength when the wind rises." So he descended. The world below was nothing like the silence of the mountain. Markets shouted, drums of celebration thundered, children ran through the streets. Every sound stabbed into the mind like 1,000 blades. At first, Ryo walked calmly through it, letting the chaos move around him. But soon, the same old emotions began to stir. Irritation, judgment, impatience. He saw greed in merchants' eyes, arrogance in warriors' speech, and self-pity in the poor. His mind whispered again, "They are asleep. You are awake." That single thought shattered everything. For the first time in years, he felt himself separate from the world, better than it, above it. And in that separation, his peace crumbled. He realized then, the ego's final form is the desire to be free of it. He returned to the temple, broken, exhausted, humbled. Jinbei was sweeping leaves as if he had expected him all along. Ryo fell to his knees. "Master, I have failed again." Jinbei looked up, eyes soft. "Then you have succeeded." He knelt beside Ryo and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Every fall shatters the false ground beneath your feet. Do you see now? Enlightenment is not a height to reach, but the absence of anything to stand upon." Tears welled in Ryo's eyes. For the first time, he did not fight them. They flowed freely, silent, cleansing. He bowed deeply. "Then what remains, Master, when all ground is gone?" Jinbei gazed into the distance. Only the moment, only life itself. And as the sun sank behind the mountain, painting the sky in hues of fire and ash, Ryo understood. The ego had been his final master. And by bowing to its illusion, he had broken its grip. Yet, even as the ego fades, a man must face the final shadow, the fear of death itself. For only through dying can one learn what it truly means to live. Chapter 5. The moment of no self years passed. The mountain grew older, though neither time nor rage seemed to touch Jinbei or his pupil. Ryo's hair had turned the color of ash, yet his gaze was clear, sharp as a blade, polished by decades of silence. He had stopped seeking enlightenment. He simply was. Each day unfolded like a reflection in water, rising with the sun, tending the garden, sitting through storms without thought of shelter. The world came and went, and he moved with it, like wind through reeds. Then, one morning, the silence was broken. A messenger arrived from the capital, armored, rigid, bearing the seal of a powerful lord. By decree of Lord Tokunaga, the man announced, the former retainer of House Akechi, known as Ryo, is to be taken for judgment. His master's betrayal remains unpaid. Jinbei said nothing. He looked at Ryo, whose expression did not change. Ryo bowed slightly. "I will go." The soldier hesitated. "You may flee, old man. The mountains would hide you." Ryo smiled faintly. "If a man runs from his shadow, the sun will chase him forever." That evening, before his departure, he sat beside Jinbei. beneath the same waterfall where his journey had begun. The air was cool. The water glowed silver in the moonlight. "Master," Ryo said, "I feel no fear. Only stillness." Jinbei's eyes softened. "Do not mistake stillness for bravery. It is not courage that frees a man from fear. It is understanding." Ryo nodded. "And what should I understand?" "That death is only the final illusion of control," Jinbei said. "The self clings to life as proof of its existence. But once the self is gone, death is only a change of form, like mist becoming rain." The waterfall's rhythm echoed in the space between their words. Ryo watched it for a long while, then whispered, "When the blade falls, I wish to meet it without movement, like the mountain itself." Jinbei smiled. "Then you have already surpassed the sword." Before dawn, Ryo descended the path one last time. Each step felt weightless. The forest around him seemed alive. Every leaf, every breath, every rustle of wind humming in quiet unison. He passed through villages where people whispered of his past, but no anger rose within him, no pride, no regret. He reached the capital by dusk. At the gate of Lord Tokunaga's compound, he was stripped of his robe and led through corridors of lacquered wood and shadowed light. The scent of incense mingled with blood and steel. Inside the great hall, Tokunaga sat upon a raised dais, his expression cold. "You were retainer to a traitor," he said. "Your master's shame is yours. Do you deny it?" Ryo's voice was calm. "There is nothing to deny, my lord. My master's actions are his. My path is mine." Tokunaga's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if above consequence. Perhaps death will remind you of your station," Ryo bowed. "Death cannot touch what has already died." The Lord's hand twitched in command. Guards stepped forward, swords drawn. As the steel gleamed under torchlight, the world seemed to slow. Ryo's breath deepened. One inhale, one exhale, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. He saw the faint shimmer of dust in the air, the pulse of fire in the torches, the reflection of a single tear on one guard's cheek. Time folded into a single perfect frame. In that stillness, there was no Ryo, no Tokunaga, no fear, no fate. Only now. The blade had not yet fallen, but in Ryo's mind, the death had already occurred. What remained was not a man, but awareness itself. Chapter 5. Part 2. The guard raised his blade. Its edge caught the light, one brief, perfect shimmer. And in that flicker, Ryo saw the totality of his life. Not as memories, but as movement. The boy who once screamed in battle, the wanderer who sought meaning, the disciple who learned silence, the man who dissolved into presence. Every role, every face, every illusion, all of it returning to the same source. The sword descended. Ryo did not flinch. The body remained still, not out of defiance, but because there was no one left to move. The self that trembled, the self that clung, the self that feared, all had fallen away long before the blade ever touched him. In the instant the steel should have found flesh, something impossible happened. The sound slowed, stretched, and vanished. The hall was utterly silent, and in that silence, there was no separation. Ryo was the sword. Ryo was the air trembling between motion and stillness. Ryo was the Lord on his dais, the guards with shaking hands, the sound of wind against the paper walls. He saw that life and death were not two. They were simply the rhythm of existence breathing in and out. When awareness returned, the sword had stopped. The guard's eyes were wide, the blade quivering inches from Ryo's neck. Tokunaga's voice broke the silence. "Why do you hesitate?" The guard was trembling. "My lord, I cannot." His eyes, "They do not see me. They are me." The hall erupted in whispers. Ryo stood unmoving, serene, his gaze neither pleading nor proud. Tokunaga rose, fury and fear interwoven in his tone. "Kill him!" But the moment had already passed. The old lord's voice faded beneath the weight of something greater than authority. Presence. Ryo stepped forward slowly, each movement soundless. "My lord," he said gently, "your anger is only your reflection. The sword you raise is against yourself." Tokunaga staggered back, his expression cracking. For an instant, he saw in Ryo's calm face the unbearable truth of his own chaos. He lowered his hand. "Go," he whispered. Ryo bowed deeply, not as a man sparing his life, but as awareness bowing to itself. He turned and walked out into the dawn. Outside, the city was waking. Merchants opening their stalls, bells ringing from distant temples. Every sound was vibrant, alive. Ryo inhaled, and the air filled him with a peace that words could never touch. He realized there was no difference between the mountain's silence and the market's noise. Both were forms of the same eternal presence. He began walking, not toward any destination, but through the endless now. The wind carried the scent of the earth, the sky opened wide, and within him, no thought, no self, no name, just being. And in that being, he understood the final truth Jinbei had prepared him for all along. Presence is not the absence of death. It is the absence of self, the end of resistance to what is. Far behind him, in the mountain temple, Jinbei felt a sudden calm in the air, a stillness so complete that even the leaves seemed to stop moving. He smiled faintly, set down his broom and whispered, "The circle is complete." Final moral: presence is not escape from chaos. It is becoming the still I within it. When the self dissolves, life and death lose their borders, and what remains is peace unshaken. There comes a moment in every warrior's life when the sword is no longer pointed outward, but inward. A moment when you realize the true battle was never with the world, but with the self that sought to control it. Ryo's journey began in fire and ended in silence. Yet that silence was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of understanding, because the art of presence is the art of dying before death, to see the world not through desire or fear, but through the clarity of surrender, to walk through chaos without becoming it, to stand in the storm and realize the storm is you, and in that realization, you are free. The ancient masters called it Mushin, the mind of no mind. Modern psychology calls it flow. But names don't matter, only awareness does. If you listen closely, you can still hear him. The echo of Ryo's steps across the mountain, blending with your own heartbeat. A reminder that presence is not something to find. It's what remains when everything falls away. If this story reached you, if it reminded you of your own path through fear, ego, and silence, then don't let it end here. Like this video, so the algorithm knows more warriors still walk this earth. Comment below, "I walk the path," and join the circle. Subscribe, not to follow me, but to follow the way within yourself. Every week, we forge another fragment of the warrior spirit, through discipline, stillness, and presence. Together, we awaken what the modern world has forgotten. This is not entertainment. This is training for the soul. So breathe. Watch again if you must. And remember, the warrior who feels no chaos has already mastered life.